In the grand theater of human interaction, the most formidable players are often those who speak the least. They move through rooms like shadows cast by candlelight, their presence felt long before their intentions are understood. These individuals have mastered what Niccolò Machiavelli understood centuries ago: true power is not announced with trumpets and declarations, but cultivated in silence and wielded with surgical precision. The concept of becoming subtly dangerous is not about physical threat or intimidation. It is about developing an inner fortress so impregnable that external forces cannot shake your foundation. When you destroy your weak self, those parts that seek validation, fear rejection, and crumble under pressure, you create something far more valuable than mere confidence. You create an unassailable position from which to navigate the complexities of power, influence, and human nature. Consider the boardroom executive who never raises their voice yet commands absolute attention when they speak. Watch the diplomat who negotiates treaties not through aggressive posturing but through calculated silence and strategic revelation of information. Observe the master craftsperson who lets their work speak volumes while they remain mysteriously quiet about their methods. These individuals share a common understanding: the strongest position is often the one that appears deceptively calm. The journey toward this subtle form of power begins with a fundamental recognition that most people operate from positions of reactive weakness. They respond to criticism with defensiveness, to challenges with loud protests, to uncertainty with anxious chatter. They broadcast their insecurities through body language, verbal tics, and desperate attempts to prove their worth. In doing so, they hand over their power to anyone observant enough to recognize these patterns. The transformation from reactive weakness to subtle strength requires dismantling these automatic responses. It means developing the discipline to observe before acting, to listen more than you speak, and to understand that your reputation is built not on what you claim about yourself, but on what others consistently observe in your actions. In the modern world, this principle manifests in countless ways. The entrepreneur who lets their revenue speak louder than their marketing claims. The artist who allows their work to generate curiosity rather than explaining their creative process to anyone who will listen. The leader who demonstrates competence through consistent results rather than through self-promotional speeches. Each of these approaches recognizes that sustainable influence comes from creating value that others can recognize, rather than from convincing others of your value through words. The weak self that must be destroyed is the version of you that needs external validation to feel secure. It is the part that explains too much when questioned, that seeks approval from those whose opinions ultimately matter little, and that changes direction based on the shifting winds of social opinion. This weak self is not evil or shameful, it is simply unprepared for the realities of how power actually operates in human relationships. The process of dismantling this weaker version requires developing what might be called strategic detachment. This is not emotional coldness or antisocial behavior, but rather the ability to separate your sense of self-worth from the immediate reactions of others. When someone criticizes your work, the strong self evaluates the criticism for useful information while the weak self either collapses into defensive explanations or launches into counterattacks. The difference between these responses often determines who holds power in the interaction. Strategic detachment also means understanding that most conflicts are not actually about you, even when they appear to be. The colleague who challenges your ideas in meetings may be dealing with their own insecurities about their position. The client who makes unreasonable demands may be under pressure from their own superiors. The friend who becomes suddenly distant may be processing personal issues that have nothing to do with your relationship. When you can see these dynamics clearly, without taking them personally, you gain the ability to respond from a position of clarity rather than emotional reactivity. This clarity becomes a form of invisible armor. Others sense that their usual tactics for creating emotional disruption simply bounce off you without effect. Your consistency in remaining calm and focused forces them to either escalate their behavior to obviously inappropriate levels, or to abandon their attempts at manipulation entirely. Either outcome reveals useful information about their character and intentions. The cultivation of mystery is another essential element in developing subtle influence. In a culture that encourages constant sharing and self-revelation, the person who maintains thoughtful privacy creates natural curiosity. This is not about being secretive or deceptive, but about understanding that scarcity creates value. When every thought and experience is immediately broadcast to the world, individual thoughts and experiences lose their power to intrigue and influence. The strategic use of silence serves multiple purposes. It forces others to fill the conversational space, often revealing more about their thoughts and motivations than they intended. It creates the impression that you are carefully considering your words, which makes people more attentive when you do speak. It prevents you from saying things you might later regret, maintaining your reputation for thoughtfulness rather than impulsivity. Perhaps most importantly, comfortable silence demonstrates that you do not need to perform for others' approval. This quality is increasingly rare in a world where most people seem desperate to prove their worth through constant commentary. When you can sit quietly in a group without feeling compelled to contribute to every conversation, others begin to wonder what you know that they do not. The development of these qualities requires consistent practice in small, low-stakes situations. Notice your impulse to explain yourself when someone questions your choices, and experiment with offering shorter, more direct responses. Pay attention to how often you speak in group conversations, and challenge yourself to listen more carefully to others before adding your perspective. Observe how you react when plans change unexpectedly, and work on maintaining your composure while adapting to new circumstances. These exercises are not about suppressing your personality or becoming artificially mysterious. They are about developing the inner stability that allows you to choose your responses rather than being controlled by automatic reactions. Over time, this practice creates a noticeable shift in how others relate to you. They begin to seek your opinion precisely because you do not offer it constantly. They start to respect your time because you demonstrate respect for your own priorities. The transformation also requires honest assessment of your current patterns. Most people have unconscious habits that broadcast weakness or neediness. These might include apologizing excessively for things that do not require apology, seeking reassurance about decisions you have already made, or changing your stated preferences to match what you think others want to hear. Each of these patterns tells observant people that you can be influenced through emotional pressure. Replacing these patterns with more grounded responses takes time and conscious effort. Instead of apologizing for your opinions, you can simply state them without defensive qualifiers. Rather than seeking reassurance about your decisions, you can gather the information you need, make your choice, and move forward with confidence in your reasoning process. Instead of adapting your preferences to please others, you can politely maintain your positions while remaining open to new information that might genuinely change your perspective. The goal is not to become inflexible or closed-minded, but to operate from your own center rather than being constantly pulled off balance by external pressures. When you achieve this stability, others naturally begin to treat you with more respect and consideration. They recognize, perhaps unconsciously, that you are not easily manipulated or controlled through emotional appeals. This recognition changes the entire dynamic of your relationships. People become more honest with you because they sense that you can handle direct communication without becoming defensive or reactive. They bring you opportunities and information because they trust your ability to use these resources wisely. They seek your counsel during difficult times because they observe your consistency in maintaining perspective during challenges. The cumulative effect of these changes is the development of what might be called gravitational influence. Rather than pushing your ideas onto others or working to convince them of your value, you create conditions that naturally draw people toward your perspective. Your consistent demonstration of good judgment makes others curious about your thought processes. Your calm handling of difficulties makes them want your input when they face similar challenges. This type of influence is far more sustainable than approaches based on charisma, manipulation, or force. It does not depend on your ability to convince others or to maintain an exhausting performance of competence. Instead, it flows naturally from the actual development of wisdom, emotional stability, and practical capability. The journey toward this subtle form of power is necessarily individual and ongoing. Each person must identify their own patterns of weakness and develop their own methods for cultivating strength. The specific tactics that work will vary based on personality, profession, and life circumstances. However, the underlying principles remain consistent across all contexts: develop genuine competence, maintain emotional equilibrium, communicate with intention rather than compulsion, and allow your actions to speak louder than your words. As this foundation strengthens, you begin to understand why Machiavelli emphasized the importance of being both feared and loved, but recognized that if you must choose between them, it is safer to be feared than loved. This is not because intimidation is preferable to affection, but because respect based on demonstrated competence is more reliable than approval based on emotional appeal. The person who has destroyed their weak self cannot be destroyed by others because they no longer depend on external validation for their sense of identity and worth. They have developed internal resources that sustain them through difficulties and challenges. They have learned to separate temporary setbacks from permanent defeat, and to view criticism as information rather than as an attack on their character. This transformation creates a form of freedom that most people never experience. When you are no longer controlled by the need for others' approval, you can make decisions based on your actual values and long-term interests rather than on what will generate immediate positive responses. When you are not afraid of rejection or criticism, you can pursue opportunities that others avoid due to social pressure or fear of failure. The result is not coldness or isolation, but rather authentic connection based on mutual respect rather than mutual neediness. People are drawn to those who demonstrate genuine strength and stability, because these qualities are rare and valuable in a world full of reactive, insecure behavior. The path forward requires consistent attention to your internal state and external actions. It demands honesty about your current limitations and patience with the gradual process of change. Most importantly, it requires the understanding that true power is not something you take from others, but something you develop within yourself through disciplined practice and continuous learning. The weak self that seeks constant validation and approval must be gradually replaced with a stronger version that finds satisfaction in competence, contribution, and authentic relationships. This is not a one-time transformation but an ongoing process of refinement and development. Each situation provides an opportunity to practice responding from strength rather than reacting from weakness. As you progress on this path, you begin to understand the deeper wisdom behind Machiavellian principles. They are not about manipulation or cruelty, but about understanding human nature clearly enough to navigate its complexities with skill and integrity. The person who can influence others without words has learned to communicate through their very presence, demonstrating qualities that others aspire to develop in themselves. This subtle form of power serves not only your own interests but potentially the interests of those around you. When you model emotional stability and thoughtful decision-making, you create space for others to develop similar qualities. When you refuse to participate in drama and manipulation, you encourage more direct and honest forms of communication. When you demonstrate that it is possible to maintain one's center despite external pressures, you provide a valuable example for anyone seeking to develop their own inner strength. The ultimate goal is not dominance over others but mastery over yourself. This self-mastery naturally translates into influence and respect, but these outcomes are byproducts rather than primary objectives. The focus remains on continuous improvement of your own character and capabilities, trusting that others will recognize and respond to authentic strength when they encounter it. The construction of unshakable inner strength requires understanding the difference between temporary confidence and permanent resilience. Confidence can be stripped away by circumstances, criticism, or unexpected challenges. Resilience, however, is built on deeper foundations that remain stable regardless of external conditions. The person who seeks to become subtly dangerous must focus on developing this bedrock of internal stability rather than relying on surface-level self-assurance that crumbles under pressure. The process begins with radical self-honesty about your current psychological patterns. Most people operate under illusions about their own strength, believing they are more resilient than they actually are until tested by genuine adversity. The weak self maintains these illusions because acknowledging vulnerability feels dangerous. The emerging strong self, however, recognizes that honest assessment of current limitations is the starting point for genuine improvement. Consider how you respond to unexpected criticism of your work. The weak self either collapses into defensive explanations or launches into counterattacks against the critic. Both responses reveal that your sense of self-worth is tied to external validation. The strong self, by contrast, receives criticism as information to be evaluated. It asks, is there truth in this feedback that could improve my performance? What does this critic's response tell me about their own biases and limitations?
How can I use this information to better understand the situation?
This analytical approach to criticism transforms potentially destructive encounters into learning opportunities.
More importantly, it demonstrates to observers that you cannot be easily destabilized by negative feedback.
People begin to understand that attempting to manipulate you through criticism or praise is unlikely to be effective, which naturally shifts the power dynamics in your relationships. The development of this analytical mindset requires practice in separating facts from interpretations. When someone says your presentation was confusing, the fact is that at least one person found it difficult to follow. Your interpretation might be that you are a poor communicator, that the audience was not paying attention, or that the material itself is complex and needs different presentation methods. The strong self focuses on gathering additional information to determine which interpretation is most accurate and useful. This separation of facts from interpretations extends to how you process your own emotions and reactions. When you feel angry about a situation, the feeling itself is a fact that provides information about your values and boundaries. Your interpretation of what that anger means about the situation or the people involved, however, may or may not be accurate. The ability to acknowledge your emotional responses without being controlled by them is a crucial component of subtle strength. The practice of emotional regulation does not mean suppressing or denying your feelings. It means developing the capacity to experience emotions fully while maintaining your ability to think clearly and act strategically. This skill is perhaps most valuable during conflicts and negotiations, where emotional reactivity often determines who gains or loses advantage. In professional settings, the person who can remain calm and analytical during heated discussions naturally assumes a position of authority, regardless of their official rank or title. Others begin to look to them for guidance and perspective because they demonstrate the ability to see beyond immediate emotional reactions to underlying issues and potential solutions. The cultivation of this emotional stability requires understanding your personal triggers and developing strategies for managing them. Some people are triggered by feeling dismissed or ignored. Others react strongly to perceived unfairness or criticism of their competence. Still others become reactive when they feel pressured to make decisions quickly. Each trigger represents an area where your weak self maintains control over your responses. The process of strengthening yourself involves gradually exposing yourself to these triggers in controlled situations where you can practice new response patterns. This is not about eliminating emotional responses entirely, but about expanding the gap between stimulus and response so that you can choose how to react rather than being controlled by automatic patterns. The development of strategic patience is another crucial element in this transformation. In a culture that prizes immediate gratification and quick responses, the person who can wait for the right moment to act or speak holds significant advantage. This patience is not passive resignation but active assessment of timing and opportunity. Strategic patience manifests in various ways depending on the context. In business negotiations, it might mean allowing the other party to reveal their true priorities before showing your own hand. In personal relationships, it might mean listening to understand someone's underlying concerns before offering solutions or advice. In creative work, it might mean allowing ideas to develop fully before sharing them with others. This patience becomes a form of power because most people are uncomfortable with silence and uncertainty. They will often fill these spaces with information they had not intended to reveal, or make concessions they had not planned to make. Your comfort with strategic waiting forces others to make the first move, often putting them at a disadvantage. The ability to wait strategically also prevents many common mistakes that arise from reactive decision-making. When you can pause between feeling pressured to respond and actually responding, you create space to consider multiple options and their likely consequences. This deliberative approach leads to better outcomes and reinforces your reputation for sound judgment. The practice of strategic thinking extends beyond immediate situations to long-term planning and goal setting. The weak self often operates with vague hopes and reactive adjustments to circumstances. The strong self develops clear objectives and flexible strategies for achieving them, while remaining alert to changing conditions that might require course corrections. This long-term perspective provides stability during short-term setbacks and disappointments. When you understand how current difficulties fit into larger patterns and longer-term objectives, you are less likely to be derailed by temporary obstacles. Others observe this consistency and begin to trust your ability to maintain direction despite challenges. The development of these qualities requires honest assessment of your current decision-making patterns. Many people make choices based on avoiding discomfort rather than pursuing genuine improvement. They choose jobs that feel safe rather than opportunities that offer growth. They maintain relationships that are familiar rather than seeking connections that challenge them to become better versions of themselves. The transformation toward strength often requires accepting short-term discomfort in service of long-term development. This might mean having difficult conversations you have been avoiding, pursuing opportunities that stretch your current capabilities, or ending relationships that drain your energy without providing mutual benefit. The ability to make these difficult choices becomes easier as you develop confidence in your own judgment and resilience. When you trust your ability to handle whatever consequences arise from your decisions, you are free to make choices based on your actual values and objectives rather than on fear of potential negative outcomes. The cultivation of selective vulnerability is another advanced aspect of this development. The weak self is either completely open about everything or completely closed about anything personal. The strong self understands that strategic sharing of vulnerabilities and challenges can actually increase others' trust and respect when done appropriately. This selective vulnerability might involve acknowledging when you do not know something rather than pretending to have expertise you lack. It might mean admitting when you have made a mistake rather than trying to cover it up or blame others. It might involve sharing struggles you have overcome in ways that help others facing similar challenges. The key is that this vulnerability comes from a position of strength rather than neediness. You share not because you need others' sympathy or rescue, but because the sharing serves a useful purpose for yourself or others. This distinction is crucial and usually apparent to those who observe these interactions. The development of personal standards and boundaries is essential for maintaining the inner strength you are building. These standards are not rules imposed by others but principles you develop based on your values and objectives. They guide your behavior consistently across different situations and relationships. Strong personal boundaries prevent others from draining your energy through unreasonable demands, emotional manipulation, or disrespectful behavior. They also prevent you from compromising your integrity through actions that conflict with your stated values. The consistent maintenance of these boundaries signals to others that you take yourself seriously and expect similar respect from them. The enforcement of boundaries requires the willingness to accept consequences when others test them. Some people will respect your boundaries once they understand them clearly. Others will push against them to see if you will maintain them under pressure. Still others may choose to end relationships rather than respect your limits. Each of these outcomes provides valuable information about the other person's character and the nature of your relationship with them. The ability to let go of relationships and opportunities that do not align with your standards is a crucial aspect of developing subtle strength. The weak self clings to any source of validation or security, even when these sources require compromising important values or accepting poor treatment. The strong self recognizes that some losses are actually gains in disguise, clearing space for better opportunities and relationships. This capacity for strategic detachment extends to outcomes as well as relationships. When you can work toward objectives without being attached to achieving them exactly as originally envisioned, you maintain flexibility and resilience in the face of changing circumstances. You can adapt your methods while maintaining your core direction. The practice of continuous learning and skill development is fundamental to maintaining the strength you are building. The world changes constantly, and yesterday's expertise may not be sufficient for tomorrow's challenges. The commitment to ongoing improvement ensures that your confidence is based on current capabilities rather than past achievements. This learning orientation also keeps you humble and curious rather than arrogant or closed-minded. Others respect those who demonstrate both competence and willingness to continue growing. They are more likely to share information and opportunities with people they perceive as continuing to develop their abilities. The integration of these various elements, emotional regulation, strategic patience, long-term thinking, selective vulnerability, strong boundaries, and continuous learning, creates a form of personal presence that others find both attractive and formidable. You become someone who can be trusted with important responsibilities because you demonstrate consistent judgment and reliability. The subtle danger you represent is not threat of harm but threat to the comfortable illusions and lazy habits that many people use to avoid personal growth and responsibility. Your example of what is possible through disciplined self-development challenges others to examine their own choices and patterns. Some will be inspired by this challenge and seek to learn from your example. Others may feel uncomfortable or even hostile toward what you represent. The ability to remain centered regardless of others' reactions to your development is perhaps the ultimate test of the strength you are building. When you can continue growing and improving without being derailed by either criticism from those who feel threatened or excessive praise from those who admire your progress, you have achieved a level of independence that few people ever reach. This independence is not isolation or superiority but simply freedom from the need to have others validate your worth or confirm your choices. You can appreciate feedback and support when they are offered genuinely, while remaining able to function effectively without them when necessary. The ongoing refinement of these capabilities creates what might be called compound strength. Each area of development reinforces and amplifies the others. Your emotional stability makes strategic thinking easier. Your long-term perspective helps maintain strong boundaries. Your continuous learning supports strategic patience by giving you confidence that you can adapt to whatever circumstances arise. This compound effect accelerates your development over time and creates the foundation for influence that operates through attraction rather than coercion. People are drawn to those who embody the qualities they want to develop in themselves, and they naturally seek guidance and collaboration with those who demonstrate consistent wisdom and capability. The final stage in developing subtle power involves integrating all previous learning into a seamless way of being that operates naturally without conscious effort. At this level, your influence flows not from techniques or strategies but from the authentic embodiment of strength, wisdom, and capability. Others respond to your presence before you speak because they sense qualities that command respect and attention. This natural influence emerges when the gap between your inner development and outer expression disappears completely. There is no longer a performance of confidence or strength. These qualities have become so deeply integrated that they express themselves automatically through your posture, your response to challenges, your treatment of others, and your approach to decision-making. The journey to this integration requires understanding that power is fundamentally about creation rather than control. Those who seek to control others through manipulation, intimidation, or coercion operate from a position of underlying weakness because their influence depends entirely on external compliance. True power creates value that others naturally want to access and participate in. Consider the master craftsperson whose workshop always has apprentices seeking to learn their methods. Their influence operates through the magnetic pull of demonstrated excellence rather than through any attempt to convince others of their value. Students compete for the opportunity to work with them because everyone recognizes the quality of what they produce. This same principle applies across all domains of human activity. The business leader whose companies consistently outperform their competitors. The teacher whose students achieve exceptional results year after year. The parent whose children grow into confident, capable adults. Each of these examples demonstrates influence that operates through consistent creation of valuable outcomes rather than through persuasion or manipulation. The development of this creative power requires shifting focus from short-term tactical advantages to long-term strategic positioning. Instead of asking how you can win individual interactions or competitions, you begin asking how you can develop capabilities that make you increasingly valuable across multiple contexts and time horizons. This long-term focus prevents the common mistake of optimizing for immediate gains at the expense of sustainable advantage. The person who builds a reputation for reliability, competence, and integrity may sometimes lose individual negotiations or opportunities to those willing to use deceptive or manipulative tactics. Over time, however, their consistent approach creates a foundation of trust that opens doors to opportunities that would never be available to those known for questionable methods. The cultivation of deep expertise in your chosen field becomes essential not just for professional success but for developing the confidence that underlies subtle influence. When you know your craft thoroughly, whether that is engineering, writing, negotiation, leadership, or any other skill, you speak from a foundation of genuine knowledge rather than superficial familiarity. This depth of knowledge creates several advantages simultaneously. It enables you to identify solutions that others miss, providing practical value in collaborative situations. It allows you to recognize when others are speaking beyond their expertise, protecting you from poor advice or deceptive claims. It gives you the confidence to remain silent when discussions move into areas where you lack sufficient knowledge, rather than feeling compelled to contribute opinions that might reveal your limitations. Perhaps most importantly, deep expertise in one area provides a template for developing competence in others. The discipline required to master complex skills, the patience needed to work through difficult problems, and the humility necessary to continue learning despite achieving some success, these qualities transfer across domains and compound over time. The integration of expertise with wisdom represents the highest form of subtle influence. Expertise without wisdom can become arrogance or narrow thinking. Wisdom without expertise can become abstract philosophy that provides little practical value. The combination creates a foundation for judgment that others naturally respect and seek to access. Wisdom in this context means understanding the broader context and longer-term implications of decisions and actions.
It means recognizing the human elements that technical analysis might miss.
It means knowing when to apply rules strictly and when flexibility serves better outcomes. It means understanding how your decisions affect not just immediate objectives but also relationships, reputation, and future opportunities. The development of this wisdom requires exposure to diverse situations and careful observation of consequences over time. It cannot be gained solely through reading or theoretical study but must be earned through experience, reflection, and the honest assessment of both successes and failures. The practice of strategic generosity becomes important at this stage of development. This is not generosity born from need for approval or guilt about your advantages, but calculated investment in relationships and community that creates long-term value for everyone involved. Strategic generosity might involve mentoring promising individuals who could become valuable collaborators or allies. It might mean sharing knowledge and insights that help others achieve their objectives, even when you receive no immediate benefit. It might involve using your resources or influence to support causes and projects that align with your values. The key distinction is that this generosity serves strategic purposes while also providing genuine value to recipients. You are not simply giving things away to appear benevolent, nor are you expecting immediate reciprocation. Instead, you are investing in a network of relationships and shared value that strengthens your overall position while contributing to others' success. This approach recognizes that sustainable influence operates through networks rather than isolated individual achievement. The person who helps others succeed creates allies and advocates who naturally support their interests and objectives. The person who hoards opportunities and information creates competitors and opponents who look for ways to undermine their success. The mastery of timing becomes crucial for exercising this level of influence effectively. Knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act decisively and when to wait for better conditions, when to assert your position and when to allow others to take the lead, these judgments often determine the difference between successful and failed attempts at influence. Superior timing often appears as intuition to outside observers, but it is usually the result of careful attention to patterns and dynamics that others miss. The subtle changes in people's behavior that indicate shifting attitudes. The early signals that suggest changing market conditions or organizational priorities. The recognition of moments when people are most open to new ideas or approaches. This sensitivity to timing develops through practice in observing human behavior and system dynamics without the pressure to act immediately on every observation. When you can watch situations unfold without feeling compelled to insert yourself into every development, you begin to see patterns and opportunities that are invisible to those who are always focused on their next move. The cultivation of strategic patience supports this superior timing by allowing you to wait for optimal moments to exercise your influence. Most people operate with short attention spans and immediate concerns that prevent them from recognizing longer-term patterns. Your ability to maintain perspective across extended time horizons gives you significant advantage in anticipating and preparing for developments that others will experience as sudden surprises. The development of what might be called systemic awareness represents an advanced form of this timing and pattern recognition. This is the ability to understand how different elements within complex systems interact and influence each other over time. It enables you to predict how changes in one area are likely to affect other areas, and to position yourself advantageously relative to these anticipated changes. In organizational contexts, this might mean recognizing how technological developments will affect various departments and positioning yourself to provide solutions or bridge communications between affected groups. In market contexts, it might mean understanding how regulatory changes will create new opportunities or challenges and preparing to capitalize on these shifts. In personal relationships, it might mean understanding how changes in people's life circumstances will affect their priorities and communication needs, and adjusting your approach accordingly to maintain positive connections despite evolving situations. The integration of all these capabilities, deep expertise, practical wisdom, strategic generosity, superior timing, and systemic awareness, creates a form of influence that operates through attraction rather than persuasion. People are drawn to work with you not because you convince them of your value, but because they recognize that association with you increases their own chances of success. This attraction-based influence is far more sustainable and efficient than approaches that require constant effort to maintain. You do not need to spend energy convincing people of your worth because your consistent performance speaks for itself. You do not need to manipulate or coerce others because they naturally want to participate in the value you create. The ultimate expression of subtle danger is the recognition by others that competing against you is less profitable than collaborating with you. This happens not because you threaten or intimidate them, but because you have positioned yourself as someone who creates more value through partnership than through opposition. This positioning requires consistent demonstration that you operate with integrity and long-term perspective rather than short-term opportunism. People must trust that working with you serves their genuine interests rather than just providing you with temporary advantages. Building this trust takes time and cannot be accomplished through marketing or persuasion alone. It must be earned through consistent behavior over extended periods. The maintenance of this position requires ongoing vigilance about your own motivations and methods. The temptation to exploit short-term advantages, to prioritize personal gain over mutual benefit, or to use your influence for purposes that serve only immediate interests, these temptations never disappear entirely and can quickly undermine years of careful development. The discipline required to resist these temptations and maintain your higher standards becomes easier as you experience the superior outcomes that result from principled behavior. When you see how much more you can accomplish through building trust and creating mutual value than through manipulation or exploitation, the choice becomes obvious rather than requiring constant willpower. The legacy of this approach extends beyond your own success to influence the entire environment in which you operate. Your example of what is possible through disciplined self-development encourages others to pursue similar paths. Your demonstration that strength and generosity can coexist challenges the common assumption that power requires selfishness or cruelty. The ripple effects of this influence can extend far beyond your immediate circle of contacts and activities. Those who learn from your example carry these lessons into their own relationships and endeavors, multiplying the positive impact of your original development efforts. The recognition that true strength serves not just personal advancement but also the broader improvement of human cooperation and achievement provides additional motivation for the difficult work of continuous self-improvement. You are not just building power for its own sake, but developing capabilities that contribute to solving larger problems and creating better outcomes for everyone involved. The journey from weakness to strength, from reactive to strategic, from desperate to dangerous, ultimately becomes a journey from isolation to connection, from scarcity to abundance, from fear to confidence. The person who has destroyed their weak self and developed genuine strength no longer operates from the assumption that others' success diminishes their own opportunities. Instead, they understand that sustainable success comes from creating value that serves multiple parties simultaneously. They recognize that the strongest position is often achieved by helping others become stronger as well. They know that the most reliable form of security comes from being so valuable to others that harming you would damage their own interests. This understanding transforms the very nature of competition and conflict. Rather than fighting others for limited resources or opportunities, you focus on expanding the overall pool of value available to everyone. Rather than trying to weaken competitors, you work to strengthen the entire system in ways that benefit all participants while positioning yourself advantageously within that improved system. The culmination of this development is the achievement of what Machiavelli would recognize as true princely virtue, the ability to navigate complex human systems with skill and integrity, creating outcomes that serve both personal objectives and broader social good. This is the highest form of subtle danger, becoming so valuable and capable that others' welfare becomes connected to your continued success and development. At this level, your influence operates automatically through the natural recognition by others that their own interests are best served by supporting and collaborating with you. You have become not just personally powerful, but a source of strength and opportunity for those wise enough to ally themselves with your objectives and methods. This is the ultimate destruction of the weak self that once needed external validation, feared others' success, and operated from assumptions of scarcity and competition. In its place stands something far more formidable, a person whose strength serves not just personal advancement but the creation of value and opportunity that benefits everyone intelligent enough to participate.